a defenseless president, a young woman rushing through the crowd, and time standing still with the plate in her hand. That day, no one knew her name, but seconds later, that name would be etched into the fate of an entire nation. How did an ordinary street vendor sense an assassination attempt? And more importantly, who warned her? That morning, the sun rose slower than usual over the city. It was as if even the sky couldn't bear the weight of the tragedy looming ahead. President Ibrahim Traoré, after a packed schedule, decided to reduce his security detail and visit the local market downtown to connect with his people in a more genuine way. No cameras, no stage, just a man among his people. But this wasn't just another day. The market buzzed with the heat and the aroma of spiced food. Children smiled, vendors called out, and people greeted their president with warmth. Traoré, walking with only a few guards, blended into the crowd with his modest attire and humble demeanor. No one knew that behind this peaceful scene, a dark plot was silently unfolding. At the edge of the market, a young woman named Mariam watched carefully from her food stall. She was 28, a single mother, and this corner had been her battleground for survival every day. But that morning, something felt wrong. In her dreams, she'd seen mourning crowds, black coffins, and shadowy figures surrounding the president. She had woken with a weight in her chest, and now her eyes were fixed on the man walking calmly toward the center of the market. At that moment, a man in waiter's clothing appeared carrying a plate. At first glance, it looked like any ordinary dish, but Mariam noticed something: the faint discoloration, the strange smell. A sharp, sour odor hit her nose and sent a chill down her spine. The man moved slowly, steadily toward the president. And just like in her dream, the image flashed again. President Traoré collapsing, the crowd screaming. She left her stall and pushed through the crowd, her eyes locked on the plate, her mind racing with a single question. Is it really him? Is that death hiding in that dish? And in that moment, everything was about to change. The sound of footsteps echoed through the street, blending into the hum of the crowd. President Traoré continued walking among the people, still just a man in the eyes of the public. But somewhere in that crowd, a pair of sharp eyes were locked onto him, Mariam's. At that moment, a man dressed as a waiter approached the president with a silver tray in his hands. On the tray was a traditional local dish. To anyone else, it looked perfectly normal, but Mariam couldn't take her eyes off it. The color was slightly duller than it should have been, the steam rising from it was weaker, and the smell, it carried a harsh metallic tang that burned her throat. It was the same scent her mother once described the night her younger brother died. Panic surged through her. Mariam pushed through the crowd, heart pounding like fists against her chest. One thought echoed in her mind: I have to stop that plate before it reaches him. But time was running out. The fake waiter was already stretching out the tray toward the president. Mariam lunged forward with everything she had, grabbing the plate and falling hard to the ground. The tray slammed against her chest as she hit the pavement. Everything froze. Guards drew their weapons. The crowd erupted in shouts. President Traoré stood up abruptly. "Lower your weapons," he commanded. His eyes were fixed on the young woman sprawled on the ground. "Who are you?" he asked. Mariam slowly turned her head. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "Don't eat it. It's poisoned." A heavy silence fell over the square. Time seemed to pause. Everyone questioned whether her warning was real or madness. But the fear and certainty in her eyes carried a weight no lie could ever hold. Traoré looked down at the plate. Inside it wasn't just a meal, it was a catastrophe. And it had taken a stranger's courage to reveal it. Now one question echoed through every mind. How did she know? The plate Mariam had intercepted was rushed to the presidential laboratory for testing. The entire country seemed to hold its breath, and when the results came back, an icy silence spread like frost. The dish had been laced with a dangerously high dose of arsenic. If Mariam had been just seconds later, President Ibrahim Traoré would have died on the spot. But relief quickly gave way to a far more chilling question. Who ordered the assassination? A plot this bold, targeting the head of state, couldn't have been pulled off without help from the inside. The president gathered his most trusted advisors. Only those whose loyalty had never been in question. Yet the doubt in his eyes spoke louder than any of their words. As attention turned to uncovering the source of the plot, another disturbing realization surfaced. Mariam had vanished. Her makeshift home was empty. Her family claimed to know nothing. Security forces searched every alley. Surveillance footage was combed over frame by frame. But it was as if Mariam had disappeared into thin air, vanishing just like the plate she had thrown to the ground. That night, President Traoré sat alone in his quarters, haunted by the fear he'd seen in Mariam's eyes. It hadn't been the fear of a random woman caught in the wrong place. It was the fear of someone who knew. His mind swirled with questions, but one echoed louder than the rest. Who warned her? Then came the darker thought. What if my enemy is sitting right beside me? This was no longer just an assassination attempt. It was a glimpse into a hidden web of betrayal, one that threatened not just a man, but the very future of a nation. And no one realized yet. The real poison didn't just sit on the plate, it lived in the secrets buried deep in the past. The next morning, a plain envelope was quietly left at the gates of the presidential residence. No courier, no name, just a single chilling sentence written inside. I made a promise to protect her. No signature, no stamp. But it was the first sign that Mariam might still be alive. This time, President Traoré took the matter into his own hands. Intelligence agents were ordered to dig deep into Mariam's past. The trail led them to a forgotten neighborhood and a modest mosque nestled in the heart of poverty. There they found an elderly imam, humble in appearance, but the bearer of a powerful truth. He welcomed the president's men with quiet words. Mariam always knew that fate would call her one day. Years ago, Mariam's younger brother was killed during a military operation. Since then, she hadn't held bitterness, nor had she forgiven. Instead, she chose something few could understand: prayer. Her way of protecting her country was through silent devotion. She often spoke of dreams, warnings that came in the night. The night before the market incident, Mariam had a terrible vision, the president receiving a dish. Then screams, crying crowds. A nation plunged into mourning. She had woken up gasping, certain of one thing: this wasn't just a dream, it was a warning. The imam's voice grew softer. She couldn't carry what she saw in silence. When she stepped out that morning, she had no protection except her faith. President Traoré stared into the distance. This was no longer just a story of a street vendor. It was a story of unseen hands, forgotten corners, and the weight of a conscience that refused to stay silent. And yet one haunting question remained. Why did Mariam disappear? Was someone trying to silence her? The sun had just risen, but President Traoré hadn't slept. There was still no trace of Mariam. And yet, the note, the imam's words, the dreams, they were all pieces of the same puzzle. This wasn't just an assassination attempt anymore. It was proof of a deeper crack within the state, a sign of how fragile the bond with the people had become. President Traoré stepped in front of the cameras. No suit, no tie, no prepared speech, just a screen and millions of eyes watching. Today, I stand here because someone dared to speak. Someone who protected not just a man, but an entire nation's future. That person wasn't a soldier, not a minister, not a palace official. She was a street vendor. Her name was Mariam. Mariam's photo filled the screen, a candid shot, standing behind her food stall, sweat marks on her back, exhaustion on her forehead, but a fierce pride in her eyes. Beneath it, the words read, "She didn't just take a dish of food, she saved a country." The room fell silent, only the sound of hearts beating. President Traoré continued. The system didn't see her, the protocol didn't hear her, but the people felt her. With those words, the president announced a new initiative, one that would protect and empower street vendors and amplify the voice of everyday citizens. Its name honored only one person, the Mariam Initiative. But one question still lingered. Where was Mariam? Days turned into weeks. She was never found. Yet in every market, every alley, a story began to spread among the people. There was a woman. She saw the poison and refused to stay silent. because her conscience was stronger than her fear. And the president? He was no longer just a leader who survived danger. He became a symbol, one who grew with and through his people. Because sometimes a nation isn't saved by palaces, but by a single plate of food.